Mental breakdowns can happen to almost everyone. It can happen to fictional characters just like the Joker, and also historical figures and kings like the great King Solomon. Like when people see the Joker, they'll think that guy's weird, he's crazy, let's just get away from him. Or King Solomon, he was known as the wisest king of all Israel, and in the Satanic witch community, they consider him as the greatest warlock who has ever lived. Quite surprising, isn't it? So we'll be looking into the childhood of Joker as well as King Solomon to try to piece together why did they end up the way they are. What are the contributing factors that contributed to their mental health decline and them pretty much throwing their lives away. So let's dive in and let's check them out. So those who've watched the movie know the Joker's name is Arthur Fleck. He was abused as a child by his mother's boyfriend who would constantly verbally abuse him, hit him, tie him up, all those sorts of things. And it caused him to really develop a need and a want for a father figure in his life. So his mom was a current fan of the Murray, Miss Alive with Murray, so he would watch the show, picturing, I wish that Murray would consider me his son. When Arthur was going through his mother's letters, he was able to discover that, according to his mother, that Thomas Wayne was his father. So in his soul searching, he would go to the Wayne Manor, and he'll be able to meet young Bruce, and he would try to ask Alfred, the butler, if he could speak with his father. But the butler would obviously, being freaked out, decided not to let him go. Arthur would then track down Thomas Wayne. They would encounter each other in the men's room, where Arthur would ask Thomas Wayne about his true parenthood. Thomas would then tell him that his mother was crazy and that he was adopted. Arthur, being unable to control his laughter because of his mental condition, freaked out Thomas Wayne to the point that Thomas Wayne would then punching him. So you can imagine what Arthur was going through after tracing down the man that he called father, just getting a fist to the face. That really traumatized him. So Arthur, in his quest to find out who he truly was, would go to the Arkham State Hospital to check his mother's records if he was truly adopted. And in his searching, he would find out that he was adopted and that he suffered multiple abuses as a child. Sometimes when we experience traumatic memories in our lives, we tend to repress them. So think of your mind or memories as a house. Sometimes we lock certain memories in the attics of our mind, hoping to forget them. But eventually, down the road, it will always come back to haunt us. So when Arthur finally found out the truth, he decided to take out all his revenge on his mother, eventually killing her. It was quite a sad and one of those things that really led up to his full breakdown. You can't help but really feel for Arthur because just like you saw in the bus scene, all he wanted to do was to make the child laugh. And when he was in the train scene, he was clearly disturbed, wanting to help the girl, but he just didn't know how to handle it. And just bad things kept continually happening to him, like the children who beat him up just to get his sign, and that was so sad. And Arthur was just like any one of us, just a guy wanting to be loved. Unfortunately, it was all in his head. No, I really feel bad for this guy. There's a fun fact, the Joker book in the movie was paying homage to Heath Ledger because as he prepared for the role, he wrote stuff down so he'll be better able to emulate who the Joker really is as a character. And one of the things written in his diaries really struck me. It was like, I hope my death would bring more meaning than my life. That part really hit me because that's how I related it to King Solomon, because later on you'd see King Solomon saying that meaningless, everything is meaningless. So we come to the point where Joker went on the Live with Murray show. And you know what the saying, don't meet your heroes, because when you meet them, you'll just get disappointed. So we all know how Joker really looked up to Murray, only to find out that he was only invited so he could make fun of him. That must have really hurt him to the point where another line that he said that really got me was, I have nothing to lose anymore and everything is a joke. It came to this point that Arthur would consider his life before was a tragedy. Now we would look at it as a comedy because one of the last line that I want to talk about what Arthur said was, nobody ever takes the time to put himself in the other person's shoes to know what they're really feeling. So after seeing that, we got to really understand what the mindset of Arthur was and the causes of his potential demise and breakdown. We can all feel and sympathize what happened to Arthur, who eventually became the Joker. Tragedy happens to everyone, and society is messed up. But I believe that you cannot control what happens around you, but you can always control your response to the situation. Just why, be like Batman, don't be a Joker. So now we're gonna look into King Solomon, one of the most controversial figures in all of history. In the Bible and among Christians, he would be known as the wisest king of all. And as well as he was a son of the great King David and his controversial wife, Bathsheba. And in the Satanist community and the witch communities, they would ascribe Solomon as the greatest warlock who has ever lived. But how did that happen? Well, let's look into him by starting on how he was born, his childhood growing up. As we look into King Solomon's family history, his father was the great King David, slayer of Goliath, the man after God's own heart, the writer of Psalm 23 and the other Psalms. His mother was the wife of David's closest friends and supporters, who David killed to be able to be with his wife. That was Solomon's mom. So you can imagine the controversy and the scandal in Solomon's upbringing because of this scenario. And the Lord would punish King David because of that. And one of the results of King David's sin, his family life would get really messed up. An example of this would be Solomon's half-brothers, Ammon and Tamar. Ammon, Solomon's half-brother, would rape his half-sister, Tamar, and eventually abandon her. Absalom, another of Solomon's brothers, would be so enraged with what Ammon did to his sister that Absalom would kill his brother, Ammon, for revenge. And eventually David would banish his son Absalom, who would eventually try to kill his own father. And so David and Solomon would be on the run because of that. Eventually Absalom would die. And that's the example of Solomon's siblings. Imagine how messed up that would be. The heart's desire of King David was to build a temple for the Lord. But the Lord would tell King David that his hands were too bloody from all the bloodshed that he spilled throughout his life. But because God would honor King David by allowing his son, King Solomon, to be the one to be able to create a temple where his presence would rest. So eventually, King David would declare King Solomon as his heir to the throne. But his older brother Adonijah would not be so happy about that scenario. So Adonijah would declare himself king, but eventually his coup d'etat would fail. Then Solomon would spare him initially, but Adonijah will try a second time to try to steal Solomon's throne. So eventually, Solomon had no choice but to execute his own brother Adonijah to secure his claim to the throne. So that is a nutshell of Solomon's bloody family history. You can see he had a messed up childhood and adulthood growing up. So let's go into who Solomon was as an adult and as king of Israel. Solomon would begin the creation of the great temple of Israel, where the tabernacles of the Lord would be laid, where the people would go from all of Israel to praise and worship the Lord. So after the creation of the temple, Solomon would then offer 1,000 burnt offerings as a way of honoring and glorifying his God. And eventually the Lord would appear to Solomon in a dream, asking Solomon, what does he want? And ask for whatever you want, and I'll give it to you. And Solomon told him, you have shown great kindness to David my father and made me king in his place. Now Lord God, let your promise to my father David be confirmed. For you have made me king over people as numerous as the dust of the earth. Give me wisdom and knowledge that I may lead this people, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? God said to Solomon, since your heart's desire you have not asked for wealth, possessions or honor, nor the death of your enemies, since you have not asked for long life, but for wisdom, to knowledge and govern my people, whom I have made you king. Therefore, wisdom and knowledge will be given to you. I will also give you wealth, possessions, and honor, such as no king who was before you will ever have, or any who came after you. I'll give you an example of Solomon's wisdom. Two prostitutes appeared before Solomon, bringing a child, saying, that baby is mine, that baby is mine. But the question is, who is the real mother of the baby? Because one of the women, what she did was, she slept on her baby, so the baby suffocated. So while the real mother was asleep, she changed the babies. So Solomon had to decide who is the real mother. So what Solomon did, he declared, cut the baby in half and give a piece to each woman. But the real mother was like, no, 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 give the baby to the other woman instead. While the fake mother was like, no, 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 it is right, cut it in half. Then Solomon was like, no, give the baby to the woman who wanted to protect the life of the child, because a real mother would put the life of her child first. That was an example of Solomon's great wisdom. And under Solomon's rule, Israel would flourish to be one of the top kingdoms of the whole world because of Solomon's wise ways. People from around the world, kings, queens, will travel far and wide just to hear Solomon's wisdom. One notable figure would be the Queen of Sheba, now known as Ethiopia, would go there, present Solomon with a lot of gifts, and guess what? Solomon likes girls. That's why if you trace down the Ethiopian line, royal lineage, it's traced back to Solomon. Such a flirt you are. You know, in the Bible, it's actually recorded how many women Solomon had. 1,700 wives and 300 concubines. And these weren't ordinary women. They were like daughters of high priests and daughters of kings. And the Lord was not really pleased with what Solomon did. Every rule that was made for kings not to do, Solomon broke every rule. Surprising, right? And just so you guys know, in the book of Proverbs, most of them were written by Solomon, especially the important one saying that fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Solomon, what happened to you? Man, every king of Israel has a testament where they would write down all of his deeds. In Solomon's testament that was translated by the University of Paris, stated that there was a young boy who was helping out in the building of the temple, but his money kept getting stolen. So what Solomon would do, he would ask what happened. So according to the testament of Solomon, Solomon would spend days and nights in prayers, asking the Lord what to do. Then the archangel Gabriel will give him a ring, and Solomon would use that ring to bind and cast the demons who were harassing the child and the progress of the temple. He would then make a encyclopedia ranking and describing the 72 demons and princes of hell that he summoned and bind it to the temple. These are some of the seals in the greater and lesser keys. Actually, this will be used and abused by Satanists down the line. That's where the pentacle comes from, you know, the triangle star thing. And like fun fact, this is one of the seals of Solomon, and this is the flag of Israel. It kind of looks alike this. So Solomon would then interview and interrogate the demons, and the demons would say that they're only temporarily binded to the temple, but eventually the temple will be destroyed and they will go back to their countries of where they came from. And there will come down the line from his descendants one that would have complete control and command over all demons, and that person's name would be Jesus. Like an Easter egg fact that kind of explains why there seems to be a lot of countries that want to wipe off Israel off the face of the earth, like the Arabs, the Persians, the Babylonians, the Nazis, you name it. Now back to Solomon, where did he start falling and declining? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Solomon had a lot of women. And unfortunately, he already had 999 women, but one of the women that really made him go crazy was a daughter of the high priest of Molech. And just so you know how they worship the god Molech, is they sacrifice their own babies to the fire. And like God clearly stated that you should not serve any god but me, but you know, the high priest of Molech made a scheme with the wife of Solomon. Don't give Solomon sex until he worships our God. That was a clear sign for Solomon to run away, but he still did. Imagine he still chose the girl over the fact that God gave him so much things. He blessed him with wisdom, he gave him a great kingdom, but still Solomon would still fall. And I'm gonna reread his last statement in his testament. I then, wretch that I am, followed her advice, and the glory of God quite departed from me, and my spirit was darkened, and I became the sport of idols and demons. Whoever I wrote this testament, whoever has possession of it may pity and attend to the last things and learn from my mistakes, so that may be able to find grace forever and ever. Amen. Because of Solomon's actions, the whole of Israel would fall into sin. They would all start worshipping the god Molech and other various gods. And worst of all, he would lose himself and his mental health. Even he may have been the wisest man on earth, but because of what he did, he would then lose his mind to the demons that he summoned, and eventually his son would pay the price, having his kingdom stripped from him. And it will cause so much pain and suffering, not only his time and the years to come. The effects of it is happening to this very day. So that is the backstory of the Joker and King Solomon, how their traumatic experiences, the rise and fall, caused so much pain and suffering. Just because you experience trauma in your life does not mean you have to end up like these two people. If you surrender your trauma and pain to the Lord, He can make a message out of your mess. I want to leave a link in the description of like a song that can really help people who are experiencing trauma. So see you in the next episode, guys.